Super excited to announce the Law Firm Retreat Design Your Future being held this August 5th through 8th, 2026 in the Denver, Colorado area. Teaming up with Law Firm Architects, Power Strategy Group, we're going to be having an amazing opportunity for up to 15 firms to work on the business, not in the business. Find out more at powerstrategygroup.com. Welcome back, everyone. It's great to have you. Again, I'm your host of Power Up Your Practice, and today I have the professor of law at Texas Southern University, Thurgood Marshall School of Law, Joan Bullock. She's also known as the Reformed Law Prof. Welcome to the show, Joan.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So I guess we've run in similar circles for quite a while, but then we sort of bumped into each other, I think virtually, and we both are teaching law practice management or law office management or whatever you want to call it at law schools here in Houston. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and love the topic to compare notes about law graduates and just the legal academia as well.
Well, I'm an oldie. I graduated from law school in 1983. And an interesting note for me is that I went right from um, uh, law school to teaching law school. So I'm one of the few who did that at the tender
Wow.
age of what 23. I was a law professor, and I did well, but I saw early on that I did not have the wisdom or the experience to teach a lot of the students who were coming in, who were the non-traditional students, the students who had businesses, who had
Mm,
or law was a second career. I could tell them anything out of a book, but I
mhm.
couldn't tell them anything from my own experience. So then I took a hiatus from teaching and got my MBA. And became a CPA in Michigan. And I did
Yeah.
that because I
Oh,
really wanted to understand business. One of the things that I found out when I left law school was that I had this sense of cluelessness. I graduated at the top of the class and so forth, but I knew a lot, but I didn't know anything about the practice of law. And that cluelessness haunted me such that I wanted to get an MBA and I wanted to learn how businesses work because even then I understood that the practice of law was also a business.
mm.
And if you don't understand the business, you won't do well with the practice of law. So that has always been my focus. And it was from there that I became the Reformed Law Prof, where I saw myself reformed in teaching law, that we need to go beyond just doctrinal courses and just briefing cases, but actually teach students how to practice from a business perspective. As I tell my students, they are business persons who are delivering legal services. And if they see themselves that way, there's still the ethical components and so forth. I'm not giving short shrift to the ethics and the professional side, but the business has to take care of them. So anyway, I got my MBA, worked with a lot of different types of businesses. And after I left the accounting firm, one of the big eight at the time, I got back into law teaching and started my own legal practice, legal and accounting practice as well. That legal and accounting practice helped to keep me grounded and gave me the war stories. So going back as a professor, I was able to share those stories with the students so that they wouldn't graduate as clueless as I was when I graduated. And so I've been in a professor since 1991. So it's been quite a while in
Wow.
terms of my return back after I left the accounting firm. But I've had my legal accounting practice at the time when I was still in Michigan for about 12 years.
I loved, no offense to my professors, but I loved the ones who told me crazy stories and who told me
Mm.
stuff that like what happened when they practiced. And
Mhm.
I don't know if that's just, I think that's a normal way people learn, but that's the way
Mhm.
it clicked with me. So I remember stories and even in my consultations, I'll remember some of the most random facts. I won't maybe remember the person's name, but I'll remember, and so I learned through that. And I love the professors who could share those examples. And
Mm-hmm.
I also, having taught, I guess it's now 7 semesters so far, the students that have worked a couple of years or more, they usually have a lot more to add to the conversation in my classes. And I usually try to scope out who has some marketing experience, who has some management, who's had a
Mm-hmm.
business before. And then I usually call on them to supplement, some of the conversation, because they can bring a lot to the table
Mm-hmm.
to the other
Mm-hmm.
students as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to say that you're absolutely right. The war stories definitely help. Students can appreciate that, and it keeps them awake.
Yeah, I
uh,
know, right? I mean,
but
I'm usually teaching this on a Tuesday evening, so
Mhm.
I've worked a long day. Some of the not, the other students, the part-time or whatever, they've worked a whole day and they're coming in.
Yes,
So,
yes, and I'm sure you can appreciate this. When I have I have attorneys coming into my class, and it's not just my law practice course. Some of the doctrinal courses, I'll have someone come in at times to talk about a case that they're working on that works with what I'm teaching at the time. And it's amazing the amount of respect that those students give those speakers because they are attorneys. I don't know about that professor, but those are attorneys. So they make that point. Um, but another thing that I just want to note that the students really learned when I brought in people who were able to talk about their mistakes.
mm.
Usually, when I would bring in people and they would talk about how much money they made and how they were
Oh
able to
yeah,
do this, all the clients and so forth, and students after a while start yawning or whatever and say, sure, you bring in a person who, of course, they're smart. They had businesses before, their parents were lawyers or whatever the reason is, that's the reason why they were able to do well. But when those students can see themselves in that speaker and say, wow, they made a mistake. And it's all right to make a mistake. And there were all various degrees of mistakes. No one was disbarred. Um, but at the same time, they saw that the practice of law is not one that you have to be perfect.
yeah.
And it
I
allowed them to have that confidence when they go out to actually do what they need to do
and
do well as a lawyer.
I that's a really good point, because I think lawyers in general don't like sharing their weaknesses or admitting fault. But
Hmm.
if we can share some of those stories, especially when they weren't, like, they were fixable
Hmm.
situations, and how that's how we learn, then I think it helps give the students a confidence, and anyone confidence, knowing someone's gone through something. And I think something else you said, when I bring in a lot of guests, I like to have them help reflect my client, my my client's audience, the students. I want
Hmm.
them to see different backgrounds, different practices of law, different journeys of their career, different voices, so that they can see, sort of identify themselves in maybe one or parts of different guests. And usually they'll make connections on
Hmm.
LinkedIn, or help find mentors and find jobs. And so a lot of great things happen with connecting the students with those guests as well.
Hmm.
So you are quite fascinating, because you've had 3 different seats. You've practiced law, you've
Hmm.
practiced accounting,
Hmm.
and then you've also run a law school as a dean. So, and then your primary focus now is as a law professor,
Hmm.
and you're also an author of 2 books.
Yes.
So I think what we wanted to talk about was where legal education stands and where it needs to go, and what new lawyers can do right now to build the careers that actually work, because there's a lot of change happening, and you've seen things from all different perspectives over a long span of your career. So maybe we could start off with the challenges facing the law graduates today.
Mhm.
What do you think law graduates are up against right now, and sort of what they're seeing?
Oh, the students of today, I really feel for them
Mm,
because there's so much that's changing. And that course, of course, goes beyond just the legal profession.
right.
And To a certain extent, when I graduated, as clueless as I was, there were certain things that I knew if I do A, B would happen. If I do C, D would happen. You can't say that today. Um, Everything is somewhat topsy turvy. So I feel for the students in that way. But I think the biggest challenge right now for the students is the debt situation that many of them are graduating with. Many of them are graduating with six figures worth of debt,
Oh, wow.
and that constrains about everything else that they do. Some who may have had thoughts when they entered law school of being in public service or working in a small firm, possibly even going solo and doing all these wonderful things. And now they're constrained with all this debt, which means that they have a situation where their monthly loan payments would require that they work at Big Law. But as you know, Big Law is not for everyone. And so the question is, what do they do? So there are some students now who are saying they may have to put their practice on hold and work for a while so that they can pay down some of their debt, so that they can afford to go out on their own or work in a small firm and so forth, and build up their income. So what I'm doing now is working with students to have them start thinking about this or having this conversation earlier. Don't wait till you graduate. Think about it now. Think about how you should look at your finances now while you're in the comfort of law school, while you're getting financial aid, and while some of them may be still supported by parents or whatnot. But financial literacy is key in this at this juncture, and determining how they are going to practice when they graduate with all the debt and how to keep down that debt is important. The second thing, along with the debt, is the practice environment. Graduates are walking into an environment now where clients expect technology fluency. They expect a faster turnaround. They expect fixed fee pricing. Um, Clients know to a certain extent just as much as the lawyer, maybe not all the law, but they know they have options. They can easily go on the internet. So with that, there is the transparency issue as well about what things cost and how to do things. Law school has taught the students how to brief cases.
Hmm.
They taught them about appellate decisions, writing the, appellate, reviewing and briefing appellate cases. But practice demands something else. It requires that the lawyer know a lot about the client's business or whatever else involves the client matter, not just the legal issue, but what the whole context. So that's not something that law school has traditionally taught. Nor does law school spend a lot of time teaching them on the system of the practice. For example, all the engagement letters, having trust accounts, and the like. So the whole practice environment is changing, and they need to adapt. Um, there's also mentorship. I've had a recent graduate this past semester, um, and she came to me on how to do something relatively simple. But then again, I'm in my ivory tower. Plus, I'm a Michigan attorney. I'm not a Texas attorney, and I practice in the area of tax. And so, of course, this was not a tax question. It was something on the court system. I had no clue, to answer her question, but she was totally at a loss. And I told her she needs to have mentors, other attorneys that she can talk to. And she very meekly was, but very meek and concerned, and said, well, who do I talk to? What do I say? How do I ask them? All the questions that I think many of our law graduates will have when they get out, when they realize, similar to me when I graduated, that I knew a lot, but I was absolutely clueless. You don't know what you don't know until you get out. So there is a mentorship collapse here in that um, senior lawyers don't really have a lot of time.
Yeah.
You have firms that are cutting their training budget. Remote work for those lawyers who are doing remote work, and there are a lot of our law graduates to save money starting out. They start out in their homes and they're doing remote work. And so they're losing out on being around lawyers who can help them. A lot of learning is that casual learning when you're in the presence of other lawyers and they're walking by and they say, well, how are you doing? What are you doing? And then you just share with them and they might give you some insights and so forth. That is being lost. And that is being replaced. That ability to learn by watching and talking on that casual level is being replaced by Googling. We have our students now who are Googling, well, how do I do this? Where do I go for that? And that works to a certain extent, but Google doesn't tell you when you're about to make an ethics mistake. And if you don't ask the right question, you most likely will not get the right answer. So that is an issue. Then on top of that, which exacerbates this, is AI. AI is layered on top of this, and the task that junior lawyers would normally do in order to learn and gain judgment and wisdom from, for example, the basic research, the first draft memos, that's something that AI can do. And AI does it fairly well. Where attorneys are now coming in is on reviewing and properly supervising the AI output. But when AI can do something in 5 seconds that might take a junior person 2 or 3 days to do, most lawyers would pivot to the AI and would choose to work with the AI and supervise it and the like, which means that the opportunities for students to learn
Hmm.
are being reduced. And it's not just learning those tasks, but it's the judgment that comes from doing these tasks. And so how do they learn? How do they learn this? And I have to tell you, I haven't figured that part out yet because wisdom is something that you obtain, but it's not something that someone can teach you. Those insights you have to get yourself. And then along with this is the mental health. We're seeing more of our students in law school that are um, being challenged with they're doing a lot of heavy lifting. It goes beyond just law school. And when they are out in practice, that continues, but now they have the responsibility of taking care of themselves. Many of them have families and the like. And so that the mental health pressure becomes great. Um, but mental health is not a separate issue. It really is the result of all the other things that I've been talking about. And the question is, how can we as law professors not just accommodate them on exams and things like that, but how do we help them navigate this space in a way that doesn't challenge them any more than they already are, or help them to work through all this heavy lifting that they will have to do?
Mm.
So that is what I see as the legal challenges that are facing the law graduates today. It's a lot, but it's not insurmountable. But it is something that we as professors that we need to be mindful of and to work on assisting them, which I think is a different role that we had today that we didn't have to play earlier on. We could just focus on the cases. We could be like Kingsville or something in the paper chase, and that would be it. But now we really need to understand who we have in class, see them as people who not only are seeking to learn the law, but we need to help them become the best person they can be in delivering legal services.
Yeah, I agree. And you brought up a lot of great points. And having been in this space for a while and written two books and related topics, I think you have a lot of expertise. One of the things I hadn't thought of, and I can't believe I didn't think about it, but I guess it's because I've been out for a while, is you're right. How much do they owe? And how does
Hmm.
that affect their calculus and what type of job? And, one of the things I tell them is I want to empower you so you can do whatever you want to do. And you don't feel like you have to stay in a position you don't want to be in. Because there are I mean, everyone's had their own math and their own bills and their own responsibilities. But I guess I wanted them to be able to have those the skill sets to excel within the position or to be able to have their own firm. But you're right. I do think when I play back the tape, why some recent grads don't go into some practice areas because of the pay component.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and then I think another point that you talked about, and I've interviewed a lot of professors and some other thought leaders in the space. I think about Jordan Furlong, and he talked about the educating and sort of changing legal academia in his keynote at ABA Tech Show. But there needs to be more like apprenticeship programs. I
Hmm.
know there's externship opportunities, and that's great. The schools that have those. There's clinics, and those are great, but a lot of times those are limited for space. But I think I'm sort of getting tired of that quote or that expression that the students don't know how to practice law when they get out of law school. And I'm like, how are we? I don't know. I take a little offense to that in a way because I've been in academia for a few years now. But I
Hmm.
also I'm not. I'm a small fry as an adjunct, but what I think like how can we change that so that they can hit the ground running? And I know that concerns you as well because one of your books was about that, right? It was about
Hmm.
that transition between graduating and before you start practicing.
Hmm.
But like, I guess this is a everything from how do we train them to how do we get them like being able to hit the ground running more readily than before. But you're right. There's all those other challenges of there's less in person, there's less time, and I've also heard reports of there's some new AI programs out there that are
Hmm.
used to train law students. My students were mentioning some of them, and it was quite fascinating, like how to question clients and things like that. And it was sort of evaluating how good they were at it. So I think there might be new tools coming out in the future, but I think there's less of an incentive to hire most recent grads in some cases because a lot of those positions can be taken by AI, and so
Hmm.
there's going to be more of a challenge to get some of those more mentorship roles.
You're right about that. With AI being able to do a lot of those basic tasks that we would give to the junior associate, let them cut their teeth on things.
Right.
Picture, that grunt in the basement, going through all the files looking for the needle in a haystack. But now we have AI can do all those type of things, or at least starting doing the first drafts. But what's really needed by law firms is the judgment that comes from that.
Mhm.
And that's where a lot of the lateral hires and those who have some experience are able to bring in that judgment from their experience in doing all of those type of tasks and working with clients. So many of our students who are graduating now are being foreclosed from that. They don't have that opportunity to do all of those tasks. And not only that, for those that do, the timeline it has shortened. They don't have 2, 3 years to develop these skills and the wisdom that comes from it. They have a much, much shorter time. Clients have higher expectations. The law firms have a higher expectation, and unfortunately, it's down to the dollar and cents, where the law firm leadership may be looking at it and say, I can get AI and it can do it in 5 seconds, or I can take time, take on that moral responsibility, hire this associate and work with them for 2 years to come up to the same point. They'll say no for the
Yeah.
most part, but but it's more than dollars and cents if they really looked at it. That they really should take the time to develop that person. But looking at it from a short-term perspective, it just makes sense to them to let the AI do the work. And you see how many law firms are bringing in AI. And it's not just because they want to get rid of the cost, but no firm wants to be seen as left behind or
Hmm.
operating in the dark ages. Everyone wants to be seen as innovative and so forth. Clients are expecting it. Um, so all of them are adopting some type of AI tool or tools or customizing their own. And so these junior associates are losing out. There are some lawyers, middle tier lawyers who are losing out, those who are managing as well. But for the most part, it's the junior people. And we're keeping the more seasoned people because they have the judgment to appropriately supervise and evaluate the AI output.
I was at TLTF and I heard big law panel, and they said we were talking about this whole issue we're talking about right here of the training and the first year associates and sort of like moving up the chain. And they said instead of it being like a pyramid where there's a lot of people at the bottom and they move up, and like it's going to be more like a diamond and there's going to be less people at the bottom. Um and I think we are going to see this really really soon, if we haven't already, that if, like you said, like maybe the short term they don't hire the new associates, but then there's going to be a pipeline disruption. And I realized that too when I was during the pandemic. I didn't hire any law clerks, and then when I needed associates, I didn't have any that I had sort of like trained in house or had a connection with, and I was having a hard time finding anyone to hire. And I said to myself, never ever, don't, always, well, I guess that's a double negative, but basically always have law clerks, because you're sort of creating that pipeline for associates, because otherwise you're going to be in a lurch if you don't have them. And because of the exact thing, like, um, I what comes out of law school is not exactly what I need. I need them to have worked somewhere else, or I need them to have done a clinic, or maybe have worked in this space before law school or something, or other, like their ability to know immigration, and understand it, like that is worth their weight in gold. If they don't understand it and don't even like have that critical thinking skills, then I'd rather pass and find some other way to over. you
Hmm.
know?
Well, you raise a good point, which makes me think about the importance of academia, the law professors, really engaging with the practitioners,
Yeah, I agree.
because the professional landscape has changed. Unfortunately, as professors, we don't know it. Now, we know that it's changed, but we don't know what that means. And many of us aren't trying to find that out.
Mm,
And I'm sure you've heard this before, that as professors, we tend to teach what we know
mm,
rather than what the students need to learn to be competitive when they get out in practice and
mm.
competent and so forth. So we really need to change the mindset of faculty to say, we know that you like being able to teach what you know, but perhaps you may need to feel uncomfortable by
Yeah.
like learning, and to a certain extent, we all know that as lawyers, one of the things we learned is that we're good self-learners. We learn, we can spout out medical technology and terminology and so forth for a medical malpractice case, and be able to communicate with medical doctors because we learn what we need to learn. So it's the same thing here with law faculty. We need to learn what the profession needs at this juncture. In this understand the challenges in this landscape. And so that means we can't just stay in our ivory tower. We need to go out and not just bring practitioners in to speak to our classes. That's very good.
Hmm.
But we need to actually go out and go to the attorney offices or the legal departments and see exactly what they're doing, how they're doing, and understand some of their challenges, and so that we can answer the question or ask the question first: what should law schools do as it relates to the challenges of the profession? Should this be something that law schools take a first crack at it, or is it a challenge that stays out there with the practitioner? We're not asking that question. We're not having that engagement with the
Mm-hmm.
practitioner. You've heard of that chasm between the practitioner and the teacher, and it's still there. Maybe getting, but still it's
Yeah.
there. And we need to bridge that chasm and actually go out, truly go out and see how people are indeed practicing law, and bring that back into the classroom.
On a panel at a conference, I heard of legal academia. A professor said to lawyers in the room, "If you don't like what we're producing, then just don't hire them." And it sounded a bit stark, but I think what he was really saying is we're not going to learn unless we see sort of a change in the supply demand and you. But I think that maybe a better way, I'm just thinking through this, is to maybe have some town halls or surveys and collaboration, because by the time someone gets out, it's been 3 or plus years,
Hmm.
and I mean, I'm in a unique situation because I have a firm and I'm an adjunct and I'm practicing and I'm teaching lessons. So I'm like those two. I'm in a Venn diagram. I'm a lot of overlap there, but I'm
Hmm.
only teaching law practice management and some legal tech and that type of stuff. But no, I agree. I think the collaboration and you are in a group of some professors around the country that are teaching law practice management related topics at law schools, and some are using the book Power Up Your Practice, and some are full-time professors, some are adjunct, and we're having these regular calls about like twice a semester. And I learned so much from the group, and I'm glad to have you as a part of it. What would you say are some of the takeaways for the recent graduates listening, and like what they should be doing now, and to be able to you know to get comfortable with technology and finding mentors? But where would you say what they should be doing right now to get ready for the practice of law?
Mm. Um, Similar to what I said before, I think it's very important that they focus on mentorship deliberately, not hoping that it comes upon them organically, but that they deliberately go out and seek a mentor. But that first means having some reflective time where they consider what is it that they need to develop so that they can obtain the appropriate mentor. Um, so first, finding that mentor, and maybe about 3 to 5 of them, because trying to find one person who can answer all their questions and be the be all do all for them is not going to work. They need to have between 3 to 5 different mentors. Reach out, ask for 30 minutes with them, and if they get some no's, that's fine. That means that person really should not have been their mentor, at least at this time, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
move on and find those 3 to 5 people who would be willing to work with them. Then have specific questions for those particular mentors. Oftentimes, when you see with mentorship, they say, "Okay, you're my mentor. Tell me what do I need to do, and how do I do it?" Well, that's. You have a vague question, you'll get vague responses, and it's hard to execute on anything when you have vague responses. I tell my students that they are an expert when it comes to knowing themselves. No one will know them better than they know themselves. So once they have a sense of what it is they need to know, they can educate the mentor as to what it is they need to know, at least a framework. They may not know all the details, but they say, "This is I'm clueless on this." They give the mentor something to work with, and that mentor might say, "Well, that's not my area, and they may be able to point them to someone else or something like that, or it may be something that they can give some advice on. But with specific questions, they'll get specific answers, and that's something that the person can work with. So that's very, very important. And with mentorship, all the other things, I wouldn't say necessarily fall in place, but it makes it easier. The
Hmm.
debt situation, for example, uh, having someone that they can bounce some questions off about, well, I have all this debt, and what do you think I should do? Should I take time off and work at another job before I go into the practice, or whatever? That person can work with them on that. When it comes to the practice environment and how they need to be developing their skills and what skills should they focus on first. I remember, and this has been said to me before, how to it's good to be a utility hitter. Um, and some people look at that as a jack of all trades. That you can be something of everything, so that way you'll be be called. But in this current hour, I think it's more important to have a certain depth of skill rather than having a lot of shallow skills. You know, I think it is important to be a team player. So I mean, a utility hitter in terms of being a team player, but it's very important to have a depth of skill and become good at that. Similar to how a lot of lawyers, they have niche practices instead of trying to be the one that does every type of law. The ones who tend to succeed are those who have a niche or boutique practice.
Hmm.
So a mentor can help with that as well, helping that person look at what works for them, what practice areas or what skills would be best for them to really hone in on and to do well. Technology competence is going to be important regardless. But even within that, how they can develop from their own vantage point and make that work for them. Um, so mentorship is extremely important. And just to go back a little bit, one of the things I think that law schools can help with this is that we as law professors need to stop thinking that it's the profession that's going to teach them how to practice law. It
Mm.
starts with the law school, but also it's incumbent upon the law firms to realize that they do have a responsibility in working with these recent graduates and helping them develop the skills needed to do well. So it's a joint responsibility of law firms and practitioners along with the law schools. And that's why it is so important that we have that deliberate engagement of law faculty with the practicing bar to do that.
I'm glad you added that because I was going to ask for those listening with with the firms. What would you say about the what we should know about graduates that we're hiring right now? But going in knowing that we're going to be filling in some of the gap or bridging that gap from where how they
Hmm.
come out, and
Hmm.
just knowing that that's just needed, and there are so much changes happening. So we have to build that time in to train them, and
Hmm.
and I definitely see that from all the law grads I've hired. Before we go to the fun fact questions and close up, I wanted to ask: was there any feedback about the book, or just, you used it for the first time this semester with the law students, and just sort of maybe your takeaway of Power Up Your Practice, the book?
Yes, this was the first semester the past spring semester that I used the book. And I had a relatively small class, so that was good because I had an opportunity to have a much more of an exchange with my students versus a larger class.
Hmm.
Your book was a very good jumping off point for a lot of different conversations as it relates to the various topics of your book. I think it was like 15 chapters and so forth. But each chapter was just filled with a lot of information that I, as a professor, could jump off on to talk to my class about. I did something interesting this particular semester, probably because of your book. It just has so much information in it. is that for each week, and it was a lot of work for me, I required the students to write a paper.
Mm,
And uh, it required them to read the book. It required them to have, to take into account all of what we discussed in class. And also it required them to think about their own personal lives, personal, professional lives as to how they've lived it so far, and putting that all together to explain how they would engage in the practice of law. And I got some interesting insights from students, so that was very helpful, very helpful. So I enjoyed the book tremendously.
oh, awesome. Well, I'm not planning to update it any super time soon. I got some other projects in lined up, but I'm always open for feedback and suggestions, and have add some more stories into the next edition later on when it
Mhm.
comes out.
Well, I
But
do like the fact that you talked in the first person on certain things, which I think was important for the students to see, because oftentimes they're so used to seeing things from a textbook perspective,
uh
very abstract and so forth. They, yeah, but here you were talking about things, and you gave context around it. So you're a real person. They say, oh, they could relate to that. They could relate to your stories, and some of them maybe have been in similar situations. In terms of how when you bought your property, or the practice of law, and hiring people. All those different things are issues that they're going to have to deal with.
right.
So that was very helpful.
Well, someone said I should put more stories, and I should put like how I overcame and like mistakes, sort of like what we talked about earlier.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, it's sort of awkward to put those things in writing, but I try. I tried, but I
Well,
think
at
those
least
are
maybe
what
some of the
relate.
the business mistakes,
Right,
perhaps,
right.
because a lot of times that's a judgment issue.
Yeah,
And sometimes it could have been the right decision, but the landscape changed. Different things
right.
happened that made it not necessarily the best decision at the time. But the real question is, how did you weather through it? How did you navigate through it? That's the important part, because everyone is going to make a mistake. Maybe not your mistake, but they're going to be making mistakes, and they need to know that they are able to work through it and appropriately. So that's important.
So just a couple questions. What would you consider as a habit that contributes to your success?
Well, a habit for me is I get up every morning and I thank God and I engage in prayer. So I do that, and that helps me in my day. That helps me ground myself and prepare me. So when I go out it's like I have my full armor on. So it definitely helps. I feel more in control of my day. Things that happen that do not go the way I would have liked, I'm much better able to weather those storms as a result.
What would you consider a book or a podcast you would recommend to listeners?
A book that I'm currently reading, it has to do with my current research, and it sort of flows from this. It still involves the students. I'm very interested right now in the impact of technology, not just AI, but the impact of technology on learning, and how we
Mm,
as professors need to change the way we teach. So I still stay with the same theme. And I've already written a law review article that's going to be put out this summer on the neuroscience or the cognitive science of learning. So
mhm.
there's this book that I'm reading by Richard. Let me see. It's called "Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman." It's an old book. This person, Richard Feynman, had passed away now, but he talked about he's talking about his own life. He's giving stories about his life, but in these stories, he's talking about learning. And this is a very smart person, but he was able to observe that what many of us have called learning is that we learn concepts, we learn terminology, but then if you ask us to execute on it different from how we knew it or learned it, we're clueless.
Mm,
So have we really learned? And so he's saying that what we call learning, we haven't really learned.
mm,
So I like this book, and it's again, surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman. It's an older book, and it's New York Times bestseller. And I came across it by doing my research on learning, and I realized this to be true. I've talked to I can't tell you how many times I've heard our law professors saying, "Well, our students aren't reading." Some of them
Uh-huh.
aren't, but many students are reading. They can, if you ask them to recite something, they can recite it. But then when you ask them to step back and apply it, they have difficulty do it, even though it came out of their mouth. So there's a disconnect between what they think they have learned. They may be able to put it in an essay and get an A paper, but in practice, they aren't able to execute on that. And this is that gap, going back to that gap that I'm seeing. I saw this also. Um, I was talking to an attorney in California, and I was talking about having students who are practice ready.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Well, Joan, it's more than being practice ready. It's having practice ability." And I paused and I said, "Well, explain that to me. What's the difference between practice ready and practice ability?" And she related a story to me of a junior associate, and she was a solo, and she was experimenting with bringing, the young people in. And so when she had to go to court and she had given this person the checklist of to do list, these are the things you need to do, da 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 da, while I'm gone. And when she came back, that person did, they checked off all the things had to do. But then she noticed, she said, "Well, but why did you do X, Y, and Z?" "Well, you didn't tell me to do that." That type of a thing. He said, "Well, didn't it dawn on you? Didn't it occur to you that when you saw these things happen, when you were doing this checklist, that you needed to do all these other things?" And the answer was no. And she said that's what she's dealing with. She's dealing with people who know certain things, but don't understand how to ask the additional questions or how
Mm.
to act on things. And that's
Yeah.
similar to what Mr. Feynman was saying, that they've learned terminology, they've learned certain things, but they haven't learned the why behind that. And if they
Mm.
don't know the why, they cannot, the questions that they should be asking when they come across certain stumbling blocks, they won't ask. They'll just do. They're like robots in a sense. "Well, this is what you told me. I did it."
Well,
You
and
know.
I think this is exactly what I've had a lot of conversations with people about the strategic thinking skills and how do you teach that? How do you ensure that, and
Mhm.
that's what we need. Wow.
Exactly. And that's what I'm focusing on in learning, because it's not just teaching doctrinal law, teaching them how to brief cases. And we banty this term around, the term critical thinking. If you ask a professor what critical thinking means, they wouldn't be able to tell you. If you ask them how to teach it, they wouldn't be able to tell you.
Hmm.
So
That's a good point.
stepping back to say, well, what is learning? How are we going to teach them what to learn? And if I can bore you a little more, what I'm seeing, back to this, the impact of technology on learning, is that our students, I'm not talking about just where I am, I'm talking nationally and so forth. And it's not just a legal problem or legal education problem, it's an education problem. Students have not exercised their learning muscle the
Hmm.
way you and I may have, because they haven't had to.
Right.
So when we we have these assumptions of what they should have learned when they come in the door, and we're surprised when we find out they haven't, to the extent that we learn it. For example, I know that many students have not learned to write cursively.
Uh-huh.
It didn't dawn on me that some of the same students cannot read cursive.
Yeah,
So
it goes hand in hand pretty much, I think, if
it
you
does,
can't.
but it never dawned on me because I never been around someone who had not, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I mean, so it's the same way, and not only in the law school, but when these students graduate and go into law firms, many of these lawyers who've been out for several years, they have an assumption of the skill set that these students have. and they may not have it. It's not that these students are not smart, it's that they did not have to develop it. And many of us in the law schools have not focused on developing those skill sets because to a certain extent we think that they should have already come in with those
Right.
things.
Well,
Yeah.
Joan, it sounds like we could talk about this for a while. And I'm really fascinated about adult learning and
Hmm.
retention. And I think we're in a very fascinating day and age with AI,
Hmm.
so many different ways to take in information. But we'll have to have you back later. And I'm going to have to check out that book you mentioned. It looks like it's quite long, but I'm going to add it to my list.
Here it is right here, just in
Okay.
case just so you can, I don't know, you can see it.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. It looks like it's
I'm
11 and a half
reading it.
hours on
Yeah,
Audible. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah. Joan, how can people find you and stay and reach out and stay connected with you?
The easy way is to just find me at Texas Southern University Thurgood Marshall School of Law. They can find me there. Also, I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to link up with me there. I do have my website, Reformed Law Prof. Right now I have it down because I'm working on some things, but it should be up again soon, so they can find me any one of those three ways. So I'd love to have a conversation with anyone interested in talking about these topics.
Well, awesome. I learned a lot. I'm glad that we talked about, between the practice of law, how do we educate the law students and prepare them as they become law graduates and enter the market. So much change happening, and it's a lot about expectations, critical
Mhm.
thinking. How do we teach and to meet the needs of the law firms and the needs of our clients, actually, in the end, is what we're trying to do in the practice of law. Well, thanks everyone for listening on another episode of Power Up Your Practice, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to Power Up Your Practice. I'm Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. We love your reviews, so if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us one and share this podcast with someone else so that they can know what you've been learning on our show. And make sure to check out the Power Up Your Practice book. It's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon. It's packed with 25 chapters of strategies to grow and streamline your firm. And we also have the free Power Hub community on School to keep the conversation going in between the episodes. So make sure to keep powering up your practice, and we'll see you next time.